are you?
Really good. We've got a room here for our business law class at Velma Jackson, and we're recording this for our friends at Ridgeland High School and Germantown High School and for our YouTube channel.
Oh,
Thank you for adjusting your time a little bit today. We had a little bit different schedule at the school today. But I know you've had quite a long legal career, and I'll let you talk about that in a second. But we talked about the lawmaking process and the court system, and I know you've had a big hand in both of that on the state and local level. And one thing we've had other legal professionals, and we've tried to let these kids know that first of all, the court system can be there to help you. Just because you're going to court doesn't mean somebody's going to jail.
That's right.
Because I know you dealt with that. And then know how the laws are made, know about your local representatives and what they do at the Capitol. And I know you had a lot of well-publicized stuff with that. And then now with AARP, knowing your rights as you get older, as an employee moving out of the workforce, to know what rights you have as a retired person. So I'll let you have the floor because you got quite the resume.
Okay. Let me make sure I get the dogs out of here because I'm actually working from home today. So I hope it doesn't freeze and all that good stuff. Greg, do you just want me to just go, or you want to ask questions?
Oh, we have questions we'll have for you, but I'll let you take us through what all you've done and what all you do, and because it's quite the impressive resume.
Okay, well, I will dive in. So education-wise, I was brought up through the Jackson Public School System, K through 12, graduated from Callaway High School. From there, I went to Mississippi State University. I'm a strong bulldog. Finished my undergraduate at Mississippi State. Then I went on to Auburn, and I got my master's from Auburn. And then I got my law degree from Ole Miss. So I am all over the SEC. And on any given weekend, I am at somebody's campus celebrating somebody's football team or basketball team. So career-wise, when I finished law school, my first job was a clerkship. I clerked for Justice Kay Cobb. She was on the Mississippi Supreme Court at the time. And then I clerked for Justice James Graves, who is now on the federal side. Now he's a federal judge now. You would just have to know both of them. Talk about two very different viewpoints. Politically, socially, racially, socioeconomically, but it was great to be trained by both of them. I think that gave me a really good balance. I've been in private practice, my own practice. I've also worked at a firm before, and those two are very different, grounds. I've served as a city judge for some local smaller communities. But fast forward, I also served as a special youth court judge for Hinds County. And youth court is a hard place to be. As a youth court judge, I either saw situations to where there were violence in the home, unfortunately. Sometimes, I hate to say it, but we saw a lot of sexual abuse at homes. And so I was the one that had to remove children because unfortunately, many times parents were the perpetrators or parents were allowing others to come into the home. I had situations where children sometimes were as young as 5 and 2, and they were allowing other individuals to do heinous things to their minor children because they were taking money. So we saw a lot of horrible things in youth court. We also see a lot of addiction. You saw a lot of parents addicted to either meth or cocaine or what have you. And so that's a whole other layer. The other side of it, unfortunately, we saw delinquent minors, junior high, well, now it's called middle school. I'm showing my age now, calling it junior high, but middle schoolers or high schoolers were brought in for doing typically petty crimes. It was very rare. Well, let me say this. Unfortunately, you do have minors that commit real serious crimes. Sometimes you will have a 16-year-old that has, let's say, committed murder. When that happens, they are transferred. Usually, circuit court will make a request for them to be transferred out of the youth court system to be deemed an adult. And so usually those cases are going to go over to the adult court. So that's not something that I had to deal with. But, I had to deal with just about every other crime. And so it's a lot going on in youth court. I also served in the legislature. So I served in the Mississippi House of Representatives for 9 years. And that, I'm sure your instructor, Greg, has talk about many, many things about the legislative process. So that was more than a notion, but I did enjoy the work. As a legislator, you really are responsible for policy, you're responsible for laws. And I tell people all the time, because, typically even now you'll hear people say, well, I vote for the president. When the presidential election is going on, I'm going to vote for that. And that's great. I want to tell people, I don't care if we're electing dog catcher. I want everybody to show up at the polls because the vote is very important. However, it's really more important to your day-to-day life who your local officials are, whether that's your mayor, your city council, and most definitely what we call your state house legislators, which is what I was. Because these people impact you. You live in this state. They make the laws for the state of Mississippi. Congress doesn't make the laws for the state of Mississippi. They make federal laws, but the laws for the state of Mississippi. Something that most of y'all would know. So, right now you have to be 16 to get your driver's license. Well, when I was coming up, we could get our driver's license at 15. I mean, this is something small, but just to let you know how this is what is locally done. And in fact, I was serving in the legislature when that bill came to change it from 15 to 16, getting a driver's license. That's minor, I know, but I want you to get the point to where, your state house legislators are very powerful, and it's really important that you know who represents you and your interests, and that you are always a part of the political process. Fast forward from that, my life now is the executive director for AARP in the state of Mississippi. And so my life is pretty much between here and Washington, D.C., because I do a lot of advocacy work, whether it's lobbying the congressional delegation for certain pieces of legislation that AARP is concerned about, or if it's locally being concerned about our veterans, being concerned about caregiving initiatives. I do some special projects with and our national office is also in DC. So many times I'm in DC because I have to do work with my national colleagues. I do some fun things, you all are so young, so you probably don't know the artist Regina Bell, who's a phenomenal singer, but she's before your time. But I do a lot of work with Regina Bell. Many of you will probably know Queen Latifah. I do some work with Queen Latifah on some of our initiatives, and so it runs the gamut. So because I know we only got 30 minutes, so I'm trying to throw it all out there so we can get to some questions. But in a nutshell, my life has been about service. I also serve on several boards now, and that's a whole other discussion about the work that you do, serving on boards and making, again, life better for your fellow individuals.
Yeah, and you also, for a short time, served on the school board for Jackson Public Schools.
I did. So I did. When I first was leaving the legislature, I served on the school board for JPS. I sure did.
So I mean, you've had your hand in a lot of public policy and a lot of policy making, and I'm glad you talked about that, because we have a state election coming up next year, and I think we have several in here that will be old enough to vote. And no, it is not a presidential election, but you're absolutely right. The state elections, the local elections affect us way more than a national election, especially in Mississippi.
Especially in Mississippi. Make sure that you get registered. Make sure that your school has registration drives. It is really crucial. And I always tell young people too, it's really important that you pay attention. I know sometimes I hear young people say, I don't want to watch the news. It's too depressing. It's too negative. It doesn't involve me. Yes, it does. It involves you. Trust me. You need to know what is happening, and not just nationally. Now, I do want you to also watch the national news, but again, I really want you to pay attention to what's happening in your community, where you live. What are the things your mayor or your council or your board of supervisors, what are they voting for? What are they lobbying for at the Capitol? Those things are important. Think about your family. Where you come from, what are those things that you believe would be in the best interest for where you come from? Like you're at a public school right now. I would then suspect you would always want to make sure that your public schools are financially solvent, have great opportunities. So these are things, because again, this is what we do in the legislature. We can make it better for public education, or we can make a lot worse for public education. Yeah. So you need to be there, and you need to pay attention to what's happening.
Yeah, and several years ago, Supreme Court Justice Jim Kitchens told some of our young people,
good friend of mine,
great guy, that he said, if you don't like the job that I'm doing, you need to vote me out of office. And he wanted them to understand. He said, look, I'm old. When I was growing up, Black people were getting killed when they were trying to vote. It's very important to understand people died and people were hurt and were, killed all kind of violent ways to have the right to vote. So it's important that their deaths were not in vain. And he used the term. He said, if you don't vote as a young Black person in America, you're spitting on the grave of Medgar Evers.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up. Just to add a little bit, and Justice Kitchens is a dear mentor of mine and a friend of mine, and he's always been a big supporter of mine, and I've always been a supporter of his as well. But he's right. I think back when I hear young people today, especially young people that are African American or any young person of color in particular, say they don't vote. I really take that personal. I mean, I remember my great aunt at the time, she passed when she was about 98, but is at least to 95 and 96, when she could no longer even walk. I mean, it was serious. I distinctly remember one particular election, and it was storming. I mean, I remember like it was yesterday, because I was probably about 18. I think I was in high school, as a matter of fact. And she was like, I've got to get to the polls. And I remember even my mother was like, oh, sweetie, it's just so bad out. You're in the wheelchair. Don't worry about it. We know you've always been concerned about the cause. And, this time I'm sure for a 95-year-old Black woman who can no longer even walk, we understand why you're not going this time, or we'll just get you an absentee ballot. Let me tell you something. That 95-year-old great aunt of mine, and I stand on her shoulders to this day, she was so serious about what they had gone through, because she remembered when they would literally go to the clerk's office, because she was from Coahoma County, she was from Clarkston, Mississippi, which, the Delta was a whole other level of atrocities during that era. They had to count how many bubbles were in a bar of soap. She remembers foolishness like that. And she was like, she didn't even trust absentee. She said, I don't trust it. I think they can throw it away. I'm not going to do it. So in the rain, in the storm, this 90-year-old woman in her wheelchair, we got her to the poll. That's just how serious it was for her to vote. So when I hear of an 18-year-old able-bodied in 22, where nothing's going to happen to you when you go vote, your house is not going to get bombed tonight. It won't go up in fire. Your children are not in danger. I honestly can't stomach it. I'll be honest with you. I literally cannot stomach when I hear anybody, from my community say they're not voting. That angers me. Like you would not.
Yeah, I agree. And we have about 5 or 6 that'll be old enough to vote in the next state election. So, and we'll have some that watch this later that'll be old enough as well. And just can't stress that enough. The state elections in Mississippi coming up are extremely important next November. Obviously the national elections are important, but those are, just extremely important. Now, 2 things I did want to ask about before I get to the students' questions is, one thing that you were so great at in the legislature is, even though you were a member of the Democratic Party, you were known as being the main go-to person to be able to work with anybody in that chamber. Right. And then so much of that missing in the state government now and in the national government. So why was that so important for you to have that reputation and be able to be professional with everyone you were working with?
I thank you for that, first of all. And I do hear that often. I'm always humbled and honored when people tell me that, from both sides of the aisle and both races as well. I do appreciate that. Things are very different now. Unfortunately, things have gotten really toxic, and people are really in extreme camps to me on both sides. I'll be honest. I think it's on both sides. I'm with you on that one. They're like dinosaurs and toxic, extreme viewpoints. But before, I really, and I think about Governor Winter, who's no longer with us, but Governor Winter was also a friend of my mother's. And he and I had lunch one day, and shortly after I was first elected. And one of the things he told me, because I think Governor Winter was a true statesman. I mean, he just really was. I mean, he embodied it better than anybody. But that was one of the things he said. He said, I feel as though the belief of being a true statesman is no longer there. He said, there are very few of you that are really looking at this and trying to say, yes, I have my party diehard beliefs, that there are some beliefs in the party I represent that I just truly did believe, like public education. Look, don't talk to me about public education. I don't care what it costs us. I'm always going to vote to beyond, not fully, but beyond fund public education. That's one of my things. Women's healthcare rights. That's one of my things. So I get that we have some diehard things in our parties to believe in. The list on both sides used to be much smaller than it is now.
Absolutely.
You know, and so the majority of it really was people coming to the table and saying, okay, all right, Kimberly, you need this for Jackson. I need this for Oxford, you know, or baseball, whatever it is. You know, let's see what can we do so I can support you on education, and then you can support me on this, you know. And I also thought it was just so foolish to me to say, well, if I'm in the camp of public education, somehow that was supposed to mean I was going to be against corporations like Nissan coming. That was foolish to me. I was like, no, I'm going to vote for Nissan to come. I'll vote for industry to come. But I also push for support. So that was just me, you know, and I just felt that you had to work across the aisle if you were going to get anything done. Yeah. And I'm happy to say that when the speaker was a Democrat, I was in leadership. When the speaker became a Republican, I still had leadership. I was still over major, you know, committees and vice chairmanships. And so I think that just goes towards, you know, when people know your character and they really do know that you're coming to the table, really being concerned about moving the state forward, you know, people will work with you. They really will work.
Yeah, and even if you don't want to be, even if you don't want to be in the legal field, that's just such an important skill to have to be able to work with everyone. Because
absolutely.
That's the way corporations move forward. That's the way teams move forward. That's the way homes move
absolutely.
forward.
So, absolutely.
Being able to work.
You can't go out into the world thinking it's just going to be your way 24/7, or that I'm on an island by myself. I promise you, you will not be successful. And that's in any you know, arena. You've got to be someone that knows how to work with people, and you've got to be someone that knows how to negotiate and compromise. Now, don't compromise your self-worth. That's something very different, you know, and your true integrity and principles. That's very different. But beyond that, you've got to learn how to compromise and work with somebody and work with others to meet in the road to make sure everybody gets a little bit of something. You know, that betters the whole state or whatever you're working towards.
Absolutely. Now, before I get to the question, I do want to talk briefly about AARP. You know, we've talked a lot about employment laws and knowing your rights as an employee. Right. But what are some things you're seeing that people that are retired are not knowing? And a lot of it is not that they're dumb, they just weren't ever told, because these corporations and the government can get over on people just because they're not aware of the policies and the laws that can apply to them as they move into a certain age from the workforce out of the workforce. So tell us a little bit about what you've seen in that and what they can do to be aware of the things they need to know as turning from employees and then as they get older.
Now, you know, you're right. So first of all, with AARP, you know, we really have grown. We're over 60 years old now. So we're vastly different than what I think some people still think of us as. You know, first of all, our demographic begins at 50, and I'm 50. So people tend to forget this is also the face of AARP. It's not just someone that's 85. No, not knocking our 85-year-olds. We love them. But, you know, that's a wide range, you know, to begin our demographic is 50 plus. And we really play in a lot of different spaces. You know, we play with those that are still working. Because we have a big caregiving initiative because, you know, this generation more so than ever before is what we call the sandwich generation. You know, it used to be that by the time you had to, let's say, be a caregiver for your mom or your father, your children had been out of the house for many, many years and you were retired for several years. Now, not so much. I mean, you know, some of us, because, you know, we have children later, so we're still in the thick of things. I mean, again, I'm a 50-year-old and I still have children in elementary school, you know, and my father is 80. So, my mother, who is passed now, would have been 83 this year. So that definitely was somebody that was me, you know, that I'm still in the grind of raising children. I'm still working. And I had to be a caregiver for my mother at the time. So, you know, we play in that space, but we are also really, really big with finances. And I like to tell people that if you start thinking about retirement and savings at 65 when you decide to retire, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but it's too late. I mean, don't get me wrong. We do have some tools that will help you as best as possible. But honestly, you need to start thinking about retirement the minute you leave college. Like that first job, you need to start thinking about retirement plans, retirement savings. You know, now, like one of the federal things we really advocate for is making sure that Social Security is solvent. And yes, I will fight to I have no more fight to make sure that happens. But I want to tell people, especially the kids in this classroom, I don't want you all to just think Social Security is going to be there for you. And let me be very, very frank and honest. Unless you are really high income earners, and even then, what you get for Social Security is really not enough to live off anyway. I tell people all the time that's not enough anyway. So, you got to, think about things with 401ks, IRAs. Very few companies still offer pensions, some do. And it's a wonderful thing if they do. In fact, one of the mentoring projects that I do with some kids coming out of college, I used to do a lot about them interviewing and getting a job. And then I realized, wait, I got to talk to them about when they get these offers, what to look for. Because so often, young people, they just see the salary. They just see the money. They're like, this is what I want. But then when you see all the benefits, it's a nightmare. And I'm like, no. Trust me. We want to look at the insurance. We want to look at if there's a 401k, how much are they matching, if they have a pension, because that's very different in the end, the money that you will make.
Yeah, and if you put anything less than the max that they'll match, you are cheating yourself out of.
You're leaving money on the table. No question about it. You are leaving money on the table. Always get what they are going to match. Yeah, that's free money. I said that's literally free money. Yeah. So, but yeah, so we do a lot of things about financial, resiliency. A lot of things about, taxes and how to plan, because we want you to enjoy your life. Our life expectancy increases every year. And you just see one of my cats is making an appearance.
That happens all the time.
One of the cats is making an appearance. But these are the times now to make those decisions, and you would be surprised. I mean, I have a group that we actually talk about dating. People are still dating. People are still fighting at 65.
Sometimes I had a great uncle that got married for the second time at 88.
I love it. I love it. And so these are things that we also talk about that in the sense of, your finances, because that can be really tricky. And also just quickly flash back into, I did a lot of family law when I was practicing. I did a lot of, estate work. And I used to tell people, second marriages, money and children, that's a whole other area that people need to make sure they know what they are doing, or somebody's going to come up short. So,
well, I do have some questions I want to get to from the kids, and some of these are tough. So good luck. Okay. First one, Maria Baker. She's a sophomore, and she asked, of all the careers that you've done in the legal field, which one was the most challenging?
Oh gosh, most challenging. Oh, that's it's. I know you're going to say, oh, she didn't give me a straight answer. Well, here's the thing. And this is just kind of a life hack that I'll say, is that I think wherever you are in any moment or chapter of your life, that's the challenge. You know what I mean? But then once you have learned it, it's no longer a challenge. So it's hard for me to look back, because I think whenever I was in any chapter of my life, in any job, it was challenging, because it was the first bite of that apple that I had. So, when I think about when I first clerked, oh my God, I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown the first time I walked into the Supreme Court. The first time I walked into court, to do a case with a client sitting next to me, it's kind of one, you see those cartoons where you kind of go, oh my God, somebody's actually paying me to represent them. In your mind, you're cool and calm on that, but in your mind, you're like, is this really happening? Am I really prepared for this? So there's always going to be something challenging. So that's why I always tell young people that, well, I'll tell you something my mother told me. She said, the minute you get comfortable, you're no longer growing and learning.
There you go.
She said, the minute you get comfortable with everything that you're doing, you're no longer fulfilling your divine purpose. So I would always say that always push yourself, always seek the next challenge, master it, then push yourself some more. Because, I'm a faith person too. So y'all forgive me if you're not, no offense to you, but I just am. And I just believe that, God has so much in the storehouse for each of us, but it really is up to us to push ourselves and to walk out there in faith. And you're not always going to have all the answers. So again, that goes back to every time I did something new, it's not like I was guaranteed I was going to be good at it. I was scared to death most of the time, but I just said, you know what? I got faith in God and I'm going to go for it. I'm going to jump, and so I've always had that type of attitude, and that does come from my parents. You know, they really did pour that into me. They always said, keep pushing yourself, never settle. So all of them were challenging at the time. So it's hard for me to really weigh any of them. When I first got AARP, you know, first time I was, you know, on Capitol Hill in DC, you know, first time I met with our CEO. I mean, it was challenging, you know, and I did feel like, oh, can I really do this? But on the inside, I always just believed, because I believe that whatever God brings you to, he's going to make sure you are equipped to handle it and you will get through it.
Absolutely. This is Miles Woodard. He's a junior, and he asked, "It's tough being a Black female judge in Mississippi in a white male dominated profession?"
You know, absolutely. You know, and honestly, you know, and I don't make an excuse, because again, you just happen to know my mother, God rest her soul, but she was a fierce woman. In fact, she's in the gallery at the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, by the way. But I digress. I'm not gonna get into her story right now, but she was a strong woman. Because she always said, yes, you know, I know we always want to say we're equal now and all this type of stuff, and we should, especially as Black people, we shouldn't tell our kids that we gotta be better. My mother's like, yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. You're Black and you're a woman and you live in Mississippi. You gotta be better. Just to halfway get in the door. You got to, you know, go that extra mile. You know, you see the schools I went to. I've got 3 degrees. You know, there was a reason behind that. She said, you've got to do all that you can to just halfway be seen as credible. Because they'll never gonna see you as credible, but just halfway to be seen. But at the same time, she said, but that's not an excuse. She said, don't use it as an excuse to fail. She said, because you've got it, but you're gonna have to work for it. And so, yeah, it was difficult. You know, from the judgeship, from especially in the legislature. I mean, you know, not knocking anybody's town and beliefs, but there's just inherently a different belief when you do come from certain parts of the state of Mississippi. And we do still have some towns where there is nobody there that looks like me. There just isn't. And their belief is somebody like me is not somebody like me, you know. So when you start talking and when you start talking about the schools you went through, I literally had a few people that actually questioned me. They said, I just don't believe that. Now, imagine what got me. I kind of think about what's going on now with the Supreme Court Justice nomination. These were individuals that did not have degrees themselves, right? They didn't have degrees themselves, but they had the nerve to actually ask, did you really graduate from Mississippi State? You actually have a master's from Auburn?
Yeah.
A law degree? You know, literally, it was like them looking at a pink unicorn, which was odd to me because, you know, growing up in Jackson, I grew up in a very mixed environment. My family is very racially mixed, and I have white friends. So I didn't, you know, the beliefs were just very different here. You know, even among my white, it was just different. So to be in an environment where they were coming from belief systems that I thought was way back from the 50s was shocking. I'll be honest with you. It was really shocking, but it doesn't matter. Show up in the world, be who God made you to be, and prove them wrong. Prove them wrong every time.
And that goes for anyone. I mean,
anybody.
The world doesn't owe anybody anything, and that includes people that look like me too. So nobody owes you
nothing. Nobody owes something. That was my dance lesson. He was like, nobody owes you anything. You got to work hard and you got to go get it.
Absolutely. This is Brandon Lemon, and he's a senior. And he asked, what are some laws that you wish were not changed in Mississippi?
That I wish were not changed?
Yes.
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think about what laws have been changed that were not changed. I would really have to think. I think about things that have not happened that I would like to see happen more so. That have changed, that have not changed. Yeah, I would. That's a really good one, though. I'm actually gonna have to think about that. But I can say the things that are still not where they need to be. One I mentioned earlier, public education is still. I mean, look, kudos. I know, you know, they're about to get the teacher pay raise, but it still is not adequate.
Yeah.
And that still does not address the whole funding of the public schools.
There you go. The pay raise, but the funding still needs to be uniform. I agree.
Right. That is, you know, dismal. You know, healthcare. You know, we still have not expanded our Medicaid. And I think that is crucial for a state like ours that has such a high percentage of those that are really struggling socioeconomically. And that's really sad to me because I just think that helps everybody. That doesn't, that shouldn't be a party thing. It shouldn't be a race thing because, people are struggling in the state everywhere. So things like that, really still bother me. Trying to think about some others. Education and healthcare are probably my two biggest things that I am still disturbed by that the state has not moved on in a better way.
Yeah, and because in those 9 years you're in the legislature, there was a lot of change that you were a big part of too. So
it's a good change. One of my big bills that I did at the time, although it's gotten even better since, but at the time it was the first really ever, was really strengthen a lot of our domestic violence laws, our stalking laws, our human trafficking was huge. That was the first really huge comprehensive piece of human trafficking bill that really somewhat put us in line with federal bills, and it was huge, and it really helped to shore up and protect those of us, some of our most vulnerable in our state. We've done a lot of good work. I never want to sound negative. I know sometimes you can have legislators that are very negative, so I don't want to sound negative. There is a lot of good work that is done every session that was done while I was serving, but we've got a long way to go.
Absolutely.
We've got a long way to go.
I'm with you 100%. I've got two more from the students. This is Shania Jackson. She's a junior, and this is a great question. She goes, obviously you're in a lot of areas. So what is the easiest way for you to separate your long-term and short-term goals?
Ooh, long-term and short-term. That is a good one. Y'all are good. Yeah. I think it is important to, because I do think sometimes you can get overwhelmed if you have too lofty of long-term goals. And so I'm always really good about telling people to be first of all, be very flexible with just what you want your life plan to be, whether it's school, job, career, children, marriage, whatever. Be very flexible, because those of us that are inflexible are the ones that struggle in life, because life is never going to go as you planned it out. And sometimes you have to just do the work hard. You start off in things that are just, that are your strengths. For instance, at Mississippi State, my bachelor's was in English because that was my strong suit. I mean, why would I try to be an engineer major? Math was not my thing. So I knew where my strengths lie. And I just said, okay, let me just really work what my strengths are and make them even stronger, and I would just keep layering on and I will find my way. I enjoyed practicing law, but I was not one that said, don't get me wrong, there are some people that say, look, I want to do X and I will do X until I die. And that's fine if that's you. That really is some people. But I was never that person. I was always the person that I had certain things that I really enjoyed doing. And I knew I wanted to make a difference in certain areas. And then again, my faith, I always would pray to God, wherever I was in any chapter of my life, is there something more for me to do? And if you're ready to move me, open the door. Yeah. And every time he did, and that's faith, because I think that happens to many of us, but we're afraid to really walk through the door. It goes back to someone's earlier question, because we start saying, oh, I don't know if I can do it, or I don't have a guarantee that I can do it, so I'm not going to do it. So I'm just going to stay right here and just be at baseline forever. And again, if that's your happy place, because that's their happy place, and it's nothing wrong with that. But if you know you want to stretch and grow and be challenged, then you make that prayer. But just know when he opens up the door, God is going to expect you to move your feet, and you got to be a hard worker, So I think with setting goals, I always tell people, a donkey would never win the Kentucky Derby. A donkey is never, prepared to win the Kentucky Derby. You've got to be a thoroughbred in life. You've got to have a strong work ethic, and that's one of my strong suits. I remember when I was campaigning, I actually beat an incumbent, which is very hard to do, by the way. It's almost unheard of to beat an incumbent. And it's funny because, again, they see the exterior. And I mean, I was much younger then than I am now, so I probably looked like a baby then. and a lot of people like, oh, she's just young, and she's a little girl, and oh, she's not going to work. And oh, my honey, he got tired. He started saying, good Lord, she's everywhere. She makes every event. She's on every show. She's campaigning. I'm knocking on every door, you know, and so you cannot outwork me. That is the God's honest truth. That's impossible. You cannot outwork me. And you have to be the same type of person. You have to have that same type of character. So set the short-term goals that are reachable, that will continue to build your confidence and continue to layer on brick by brick to get you to your long-term. But even when you have a long-term goal, be open. Be open to what God may have for you. God may want to change you and make you go left. But trust him, go left. Because apparently going left, he's got something better for you than what you thought you wanted yourself.
Yeah. And you can still get to the goal, just a different path to get there.
That's a different path. That's a different path.
I've got one more from the students. This is Anastasia Brown. She's a junior. And she asked, of all the cases you've dealt with in your legal career, what was your favorite one to do?
You know what? So I'm going to give you some funny, silly ones. There was one in youth court, and not as the attorney, but me as the judge. There was one in youth court. Now, most of you probably know about the city of Jackson. City of Jackson is not a rural area. You know, South Jackson has a few rural parts, but for the most part, the city of Jackson is not rural, okay? Yeah. So think about West Jackson, especially if you've ever been to Jackson State. So you know nobody has farm, you know, you just don't see farm animals over there, right?
Yeah.
So there were some young boys that were brought into my courtroom, and they were accused of stealing some horses. And so you start going, wait, what? How did these young boys get horses? And it literally like right down the road from Jackson State. That's where they live. So, but I'll never forget, one of the mothers comes in and she is outdone. So she looks at her son and she used the cuss word and basically says, blankety blank, I can barely feed you. You know I can't feed a blankety blank horse. What are y'all doing with these horses? Long story short, there was a trailer at a gas station. And they really were sweet kids. It was summer. They just wanted to get into some mischief. And they thought it was so funny that they were able to unhook the trailer at this gas station. And they literally just walked the horses down the street to their house. So the horses were just standing in the front yard of these people's houses in a regular neighborhood. So that was kind of funny. You know, I like young people. I really do. I like to encourage them. But that was a funny one. Another one that I was the attorney for, it was unfortunately a domestic violence case. And unfortunately, my client had been the victim of domestic violence for many, many years. And we have been going back. I mean, this divorce was just, it was the stuff movies are made of. I mean, it really was. It was awful. So I can't give too many of the specifics about it, but there was an incident. It kind of, if you've seen the movie, Tina Turner and Ike Turner's movie, What's Love Got to Do with, where she go, you probably know, these kids are young, they probably don't know, where Tina goes off in the limo finally. Well, this was kind of one of those moments that my client, after something like 25 years, I mean, you know, this woman's been in the hospital multiple times. I mean, awful pictures. I mean, it's just been all, even all the children have, you know, given testimony about what their dad has done to their mom. There was, let's just say, mama finally had it. At this point, they were no longer even living together, but he was still fighting, holding up the divorce. He comes to her house. And let's just say she got the best of him and she got a shot off.
Wow.
I would not lie to you. I took great pleasure in representing her. Yeah. And getting her the settlement that she needed and getting her out of the criminal stuff. Because I was like, yeah, you aggravated this situation. You had an order of protection. You were not even supposed to be on her street, in her neighborhood. In fact, he wasn't even supposed to know where her address was because that was sealed. So he had hired a PI. So he had gone all the way out of his way to keep messing with this woman. But he met his match that day. And all by the grace of God, she did not kill him. But she got him a good shot. And he was happily ready to sign whatever he needed to sign. And he finally went on his merry little way. So yeah, that was a personal one. I will admit I enjoyed representing her and making sure that she was safe and the children were safe and that, you know, she got what she deserved.
It definitely can be rewarding, and that's all. And that's a really cool story for her. But we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us. I know you got a lot of stuff going on. But before we go, and I know you talked briefly about this, but and you gave your age, so I'm not asking it. But you said you said you're 50 years old, and you've been a state leader in the state of Mississippi as a Black woman. You grew up and you went to high school right here in the Jackson area, and you faced a lot of obstacles that these young people are going to face. And you talked about voting, you talked about working with different cultures and working with different people. But these kids are going to face the same things you faced. Well, I mean,
Absolutely.
Obviously, it's later, but.
And let me just say this, because we do talk about the civil rights era and things along those lines, but I don't want anybody to get confused. As you say, I absolutely love Greg. He's a very dear friend of mine. I know, because I think being angry and hating another race is detrimentally wrong. I mean, I think it's biblically Christian bound wrong, but it would erode your soul. So even as a Black woman in the state of Mississippi, dealing with some of the foolishness I've had to deal with, I don't believe in that. I have some friends and some family members who do not look like me, who will jump down the rabbit hole on somebody to support me, So I always tell people, choose good people to be in your circle. I don't care what color they are. I don't care what religion they are. Choose good people who will have your back and will want to see you at your best. That's how you really make it in life. That's how you make it in life. You've got to have people in your circle that, regardless of their, political, religious beliefs or race or whatever, but when you call, and sometimes they show up before you call because they're just like, I just know you need me. So here I am. I've got some good people in my life like that, and they're not all Black. And I love them dearly. And I think that's really important is to celebrate love, to celebrate diversity. Because look, in this world, especially when you all get out of high school, you're going to come across some mess. I hate to say it, you're going to come across some hateful people, and some of them are going to look just like you. So I also don't want you to leave here thinking everybody that looks like you is going to support you, because that is a lie. That is a true lie. So make sure you lead with love and you lead with loyalty. That's huge to me. You've got to be loyal, and you've got to be someone that wants to see the best in me for you to be in my circle. And I'm going to radiate that to you too. I mean, my friends know that, they know I'm coming. They know I've got their back, so I'm on my way. So that's really important. But you got to be that type of person for somebody to reciprocate that back.
Absolutely. And you answered the question I was going to ask there. So that's awesome. But before we go, if we have parents that need the information for the Mississippi AARP, how do they get that?
You know what? I don't have, because we've got new office stuff. So let me just say this, instead of giving my personal line out, go online and look up AARP Mississippi. Okay. Even our Facebook page, our Twitter page, or just the regular website. Look up, and you can also look up just AARP period, which will bring you a lot of the national pages that'll show you different things. But for us in particular, look up AARP Mississippi, and you can reach us that way. It'll have all of our contact information. But we are located in downtown Jackson. We are in 1 Jackson Place. That's where we're in that office building. That's where my office is located.
And like I said, they may be surprised what they have access to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Well, Kimberly Campbell, thank you so much. It's always great to see you. And I know your friend, Miss Taylor, was watching here with us too. So
I love it.
Awesome. So, but thank you so much for joining us. You have a great day. I'll see you soon, my friend.
You too. Bye. Okay.